Hey everyone, we're going to talk about the origins of the Vietnam War today and what happens to get the United States involved in this war. So, we're going to quickly talk about a brief history of what has been going on in Vietnam, starting with 1887, a long time ago from where we're talking about right now. So, at this point, the French, had taken over Vietnam and surrounding countries around it. Countries like Laos, like Cambodia. And this area that you see in gray right here is actually going to be called at the time French Indochina. The area, these three countries and a few more really, that are going to be controlled by the French during this time. So this is a result of imperialism that was occurring during this time, like we talked about before. Remember, imperialism is just when one nation is dominating another nation. In this way, they're being dominated militarily and being used for their resources. So now we're going to fast forward to World War II, 1887 to 1940. At this time in World War II, Japan, as you recall, was taking over lots of different countries in the Pacific Ocean and Asia. They were becoming this empire in the Pacific. So they have taken over Vietnam at this point, the country furthest to the right here that you see right here, this long, thin country in the Pacific Ocean. So at this time, though, a leader in Vietnam named Ho Chi Minh, as you see right here in the picture, is going to kind of fight against the Japanese occupants. He's going to create this group, which is going to become an army called the Viet Minh. And you see, Viet Minh, Vietnam, and a part of his name is Minh, so Viet Minh, right? To kind of fight against and fight off the Japanese occupants. They by no means win, but they're a resistance group for the most part. So now we're going 5 years later, and World War II's over. So Japan at this point has lost the war, and the French was on the winning side. So France is like, hey, Japan's out of Vietnam now. Guess what? We want to go back. So France comes back to Vietnam, and they occupy it once again, making the Vietnamese, people like Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh, very upset. They had just gotten rid of the Japanese, and guess who's coming back? Now, the French again. So Ho Chi Minh tries to actually declare independence for his country, trying to model it after what the United States did against the British, and saying, you know what, we don't want France to be here anymore. We are an independent country. We're rejecting you, France. But France isn't going to pay any attention to this and is going to reject it pretty quickly after World War II is over and they have taken over. So they ignore it. So feeling like they have no other option, the Vietnamese people, led by Ho Chi Minh and his group, the Viet Minh, decide to resist the French occupation. So later in 1946, Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh army, the North Vietnamese army for the most part, is going to fight against the French and fight to unify Vietnam, make them a united one-country Vietnam that's not led by the French, that is truly led just by the Vietnamese people. And then 1954 happens several years later, which is where conflict is really going to start to heat up and where the United States will make its entrance. So, what happens in 1954? Well, the United Nations, remember that organization that all the countries are going to join together after World War II, that is going to fight for peace and cooperation around the world, work out the world's problems, kind of like the League of Nations that we talked about after World War I. Well, they are going to decide that Vietnam needs to be split into two different countries. So those two countries will be North Vietnam and South Vietnam. North Vietnam will be a communist country that will be basically controlled by Ho Chi Minh, that rebel leader that wanted Japan to leave Vietnam, wanted the French to leave Vietnam, and he is going to control North Vietnam, and the French would control South Vietnam. Except the French aren't actually going to last that long. France, while this whole thing is going on, this plan for splitting Vietnam into two, is going to suffer a huge defeat at an event called Dien Bien Phu. and they're going to decide to abandon Vietnam, that it's no longer worth it. So now it's just going to be a North Vietnamese communist country and a South Vietnamese non-communist country. Two separate countries. And the French aren't really going to be involved in either one. The area where it's split, like Korea, remember we talked about Korea was also split before with North Korea and South Korea. The area that's going to separate the two is the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, just like the area that would split the two Koreas in two. So, now think about this. There's a new communist country being created called North Vietnam. What's the U.S. going to do? Let's take a look. So, first of all, let's look at this picture, because this is exactly why the U.S. joins the war. We see right here, this is a U.S. soldier, and he is standing up, holding these in place. And what are these? Dominoes. You've for sure all seen that when someone stacks dominoes next to each other, if you push down one, what happens to all of them? They all fall. Over here we have the Viet Cong, which are like the Viet Minh, those soldiers that Ho Chi Minh is going to control. But the Viet Cong are going to be the Vietnamese people, Vietnamese fighters in the South that want South Vietnam, the country we talked about before, South Vietnam, to fall, to become a communist country like North Vietnam, and to unify Vietnam. So the Viet Cong, as you see here, those Vietnamese troops, are trying to push the dominoes over, trying to cause them to all fall. And we see on each of the dominoes, there's a country. Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Burma, India, Bangladesh. All these countries are in Southeast Asia, over here. So, the message is, so what this picture is showing us is this theory that we call Domino Theory, that Eisenhower, right now we're still with President Eisenhower. President Eisenhower and his team are going to call this Domino Theory. And what Domino Theory means is the U.S. believes that if Vietnam falls like a domino to communism, if it becomes a communist country, if all of Vietnam becomes a communist country, then all of Southeast Asia, all those countries, would also fall to communism, like dominoes. So if Vietnam fell to communism, Laos would fall to communism, Cambodia would fall to communism, Thailand would fall to communism, so on, so on. And just visualizing that here, if North Vietnam turns South Vietnam into a communist country, then communism is going to spread everywhere. Now, what is the U.S. policy towards communism at this point? We've talked about it before during the origins of the Cold War. Well, President Truman called the U.S. policy towards communism containment. The U.S. needs to stop communism from spreading. So Domino Theory is a part of the policy of containment. So if the United States thinks that if all of Vietnam becomes communist, if South Vietnam, that non-communist country we talked about before, as you see here, falls to communism, if North Vietnam spreads it to South Vietnam, then all of these countries would fall like dominoes to communism. And the U.S. has to stop it. That's their rule, containment. So this is the real reason why the United States joins the Vietnam War. They think if they lose South Vietnam to communism, all of these countries are going to become communist. And then communism is going to spread all around the world. So they have to stop it here and now. So let's see how that journey goes. First of all, the U.S. decides, let's send advisors to Vietnam, to South Vietnam. So the United States doesn't want to commit their own troops right away. So they start sending these military advisors to train the South Vietnamese people, to train that South Vietnamese government to fight off attacks from the north. So if North Vietnam is attacking South Vietnam, is trying to spread communism there, have their own people in South Vietnam hold off against it. So U.S. advisors are going to train the people, as you see right here, to stop that from happening, to stop communism from spreading there. So you see the American soldier right here teaching him to use a rifle, teaching them tactics to find communists in their own country, so on, so on, to use these machine guns, as you see here, to fight off the Viet Minh, those North Vietnamese troops. So this is going to be the strategy of first President Eisenhower and then President Kennedy after him. Both of these presidents are going to start with military advisors. By the time the whole war is over 11,000 military advisors would be sent there to help these troops and to have them protect themselves. But it's not going to be enough. The North Vietnamese want a unified communist Vietnam, and they're going to get it. So something happens, though, that complicates these efforts. We ended just a second ago on Kennedy wanting advisors. Well, that's not going to stay true, because something's going to happen to Kennedy. Kennedy's going to be assassinated while at a parade in Dallas in a convertible, where he's going to be shot in the head. Because of this, his vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ for short, as you're going to hear me talk about him, LBJ Johnson is going to become the president. And Johnson's going to change the strategy in the Vietnam War. It's not going to just be advisors anymore. He is going to choose to escalate the war. And it all starts with this event called the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And we're going to talk about that next time. Thanks, guys.